channel. I guess I can tweet it to
I've pinned it
TNA
on top
TW.
already. Pin it
Okay,
on top.
thank you, Cheryl. All right, but it reads like a horror story. It really does. I'm done.
Okay, so I don't remember what my non-tech story was. Uh, that the mayor. It is tech related. It's the district attorney of San Francisco, Chesa Boudin, has been recalled. That's actually quite. It's kind of techie news. It's probably one of the biggest stories for geeks from San Francisco, or for anyone from San Francisco. And the relevance is that Chesa had rather extremish views as a district attorney about not punishing people for crimes, basically, and it turned San Francisco into a crime-filled wasteland and causing waves and hordes of people to flee San Francisco. Very wealthy people who no longer felt safe, and we read some headlines months ago about how Walgreens were shutting down and Rite Aids were shutting down because people were going in and just taking whatever they wanted and stripping the store down to the fucking bolts, because there was no punishment for committing crimes in San Francisco, so it turned into a one hell of a rodeo over there, and people had enough was enough, and so now they've voted. They did a recall on the Chesa Boudin, the district attorney, who more or less refused to who try in a court people who were committing crimes, essentially. So, I guess we get into the big tech news now. Here we go. Hold on while we get the webpage rolling. I'm ready. Cheryl, are you ready? Are we streaming? We're
Yes.
streaming. Hello, Cal. If you're listening, let's do this. Everybody, happy Wednesday, June 8th. Here we go. Top story today from Wired. It says, a look at Apple's plan to debut passkeys, a passwordless login for apps and websites, in iOS 16 and macOS Ventura, and no doubt iPad OS, whatever one they're on, using Touch ID or Face ID for authentication, meaning your hand or your face. Touch ID or Face ID. As the Apostle John says in the Book of Revelations, by the way, strangely enough. And we saw Apple reveal this on Monday, so just 2 days ago, 48 hours ago, nearly exactly 48 hours ago, Apple revealed this, that they want to get rid of passwords. By the way, so does Google. By the way, so does Microsoft. By the way, so does all of them, because passwords are a huge liability, because, again, people are, at the end of the day, are kind of stupid and not able to manage those effectively, and it causes all kinds of big headaches for people, and more importantly, for companies. So, tying it to something a little more simpler that you can't forget, like your face or your finger, will resolve some of those headaches for those big companies. But who is this really helping at the end of the day? I would argue that they're going to argue that it helps you, but this is one of those classic trade-offs of security versus privacy. So, because you're trading in potentially some of your privacy for some of this extra security, they're going to tell you this is more secure. And actually it is. Technically it is more secure for you. And it's a whole lot less headaches for them. So they benefit. You do benefit in the sense that it is more secure. You lose, and the question is how much, with regard to your privacy. To be determined how much you will lose, and to what degree you lose, and precisely what that loss will entail and how it will manifest, in the sense that your privacy might somehow be violated in some sense, and over some window at some point in the future. But of course, we will see that headline when we get there. So, looking at the historical track record of these things, it will happen sooner than anyone can ever imagine. That's just the nature of tech. We always assume we came up with the right solution, and are so proud of ourselves. So when we roll it out and it's great, and then we figured it out yet again, and next thing you know, oh shit, we didn't think about this second order effect, it's called, or third order effect, where this is now going to lead to some other consequence that nobody anticipated. That's even going to be worse than what we started off with, and that's the crazy, endless snowball of second and third order effects that happen with tech. And here we are in 2022, with no one having kids and no one dating and no one having sex and all this shit because of, and with declining birth rate and declining sperm rates and everything's seemingly getting much better, hence utopia, and much worse, aka dystopia, simultaneously. We're reaching simultaneous utopia, a dystopian utopia. So there we
On
are.
this on this note of Apple, I actually have a question for you guys. Ever since I got my new laptop, I noticed the privacy controls on it is really weird. It's not the same as it was before. Like share screen, now they're making me have to give them permission to access my key, like I think to track my keyboard typing. It's just, yeah, I've noticed a shift. Sorry to bring it up. I don't know if anybody else has.
Yes, Pauline, I agree. Me too. When it was updated, it happened to me too.
I agree. The new laptop have multiple steps before you could do things, and it's making it difficult do some actions over and over again. But at the same time, perhaps it's better in security. We'll find out soon.
I
Oh,
almost feel like they're using it as an opportunity to overreach a little bit, right? So it's kind of like, oh, I want to share my screen. Why do you have to track my keyboard?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not sure there's any keyboard tracking, so I'm not really sure what you're referring to, but it's definitely a much more secure operating system.
there are, by the way, for those who aren't aware, it is possible to identify somebody purely by the way that they type on a keyboard. And to a certain degree, without even the keyboard, by the way they use the mouse, certain demographic details can be discerned rather concretely by mouse usage, like age and gender and things like that. So there's in fact a startup based out of Stockholm called Behaviosec, meaning short for behavior security, which is precisely that. It's a keyboard tracker that can identify people as accurately as a fingerprint is, I believe, their claim, and they're becoming very, very successful company because it works. So the question in my mind with regard to these passkeys tied to your finger in your face is, what happens with an app between platforms? Like, for example, is this? I would hope that if this is really about empowering the end user and not the platform, that the platforms allow you to migrate between platforms with your passkeys. So if I'm an Apple ecosystem, if I'm an Apple user today with a MacBook and an iPhone, and then next week I throw it in the ocean and get Android devices, will all of that migrate over automagically? If so, then I'm actually kind of in favor of it. To me, it comes down to who is it really empowering at the end of the day. Is it locking me into my Apple ecosystem? Because if it doesn't migrate over, boy, is this going to make things a pain in the ass to get out of the Apple ecosystem.
Well, it's definitely usable across non-Apple operating systems, but you still have to log in. I mean, this is not new, right? Anybody who uses multi-factor authentication in an enterprise, like a Ping ID or Okta or anything like that, you've got an app on your phone, or even Google Authenticator. Any website you go to, it asks, if it authenticates against Google, you get a Google pop-up on your phone.
Yes.
You see, actually, Tyler, if I may share a few things about this passwordless situation, it has been on the horizon for like maybe last 2 years now, because there were many security companies, especially like the companies who are involved in operating system hardening and like security scanning, node end security and stuff like that. There have been like programs to make this passwordless situation become a reality. But my concern is that when you make such a thing happen, make it into a reality. For me personally, because I always use like password managers, especially KeePass offline password managers, because I cannot trust stuff like LastPass ever. The thing is, like, I feel much safer with passwords because, like, the thing is with passwords is that, it is going to be turned into a hash, and then that hash is ultimately going to be used as your password. So when, like, you use your passwords carefully, I mean, it is much stronger than your fingerprint, because your fingerprint is just like one thing, unless you use it in like some
Well,
sort
I
of
think that,
algorithm that picks.
yeah, I think that's the opposite. That's not true. Saving a hash of a password on hundreds of websites is completely insecure. So I think it's reverse of what you're saying, Sardley. It's a lot more secure not to be dotting the internet with your passwords in hashes that were written by who knows who that are very insecure. I mean, all you have to look is some of the hacks, right?
Well, yeah, of course. I personally never use one password like on two different websites. I'm
Well, it
all
doesn't
my
matter.
passwords.
It's saved on
Yeah, of
somebody's
course.
insecure website, right? So even your credit card number is saved in a hash on somebody's website, that's why it's insecure. That's why they get hacked, and that's why the hackers get your credit card numbers.
So how would like a passwordless situation help with that information? Because like your credit card will still be like your credit card, so it doesn't have to do anything with your passwordless.
It's not saving the credit card. Well, we're switching text here, but it's not, your credit card number is not being saved by the person who you're buying from. They're just getting approval and a unique number from Apple that approves it. So they can save that number if they want. It serves them no purpose after that transaction. So in the case of the credit card, and the password is the same thing. So the multi-factor authentication works the exact same way. So yeah, okay, you logged in with your face. It goes and says, okay, here's all this information. Uh, should I let this person? Do I know who this person is? That site authenticates it, and then Amazon or whoever you're trying to log into doesn't have your password saved. All they know is that you were authenticated by somebody they trust.
Right. So, um, the
Passwords are
other thing,
completely insecure. If anybody tells you that they're secure, they are completely insecure.
well, passwords seem to be working pretty well for Bitcoin network, because like I'm trying to find SHA 256 hash is pretty damn hard, or else like the whole
Talking about your
Bitcoin
wallet
network would have
password?
collapsed. It's like the hash, like it is like you have to find the hash, the SHA 256 double. Double that to get the key, the private key to a Bitcoin wallet. So that's the same thing. When we go ahead and say that okay, hashes are insecure to protect networks, well, the same logic should apply for Bitcoin
No,
networks as well.
don't forget, you don't have the private key. Remember
Exactly.
those idiots that were out there who put their private key that FBI found all the Bitcoin they stole? They found it because they had saved their private key on Dropbox or something, so they were able to go in there and get their Bitcoin. So again, same thing.
So
On a
can we
regular
agree
Bitcoin
that like
transaction, your private key is not out there. That's why people lose their Bitcoin because they lost their private key. So you're saying that we're hashing the private key and putting it out there? No, the private key is never out there.
exactly like your private key is only like in your own possession, but your public key is, and your
Right. So
like
now apply that
addresses.
to a password. In the case of a
Right.
password, your password is out there. Some 19-year-old hashed it and saved it in a database when you access his website, so it's there. So when somebody hacks that 19-year-old's website, they downloaded your password. And most people use the same password across all their websites. So now I go and try different. I try your Gmail, I try your Google Mail, I try whatever. Oh, look, now I have access to your email, your Facebook account. That's how that happens.
Well, can we okay, can we agree that AES is the most secure encryption system that we have right now?
But that's a different. We're going into the weeds that we don't need to go into at that point. So we'll. I guess we'll all find out soon enough when iOS 16 rolls out. Probably. Does anyone know the exact day or week? It's not far off. We're
I think
talking
no, it's September.
fall. They say fall, but I'm hoping it's August. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Might be September.
September. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, it was on It's they keep on stating September and all the breakouts.
Okay.
But facial recognition ID is not safe at all. everyone know, right? Even when you're sleeping, somebody can just put your face there, and if you're under
Some,
duress, they can even open. I mean, like
yes,
access anything
some are.
without your permission.
The
At least,
there are some facial. There's not one. It's not a singular thing. Like passwords are rather singular, but how securely they're stored vary greatly from place to place. And similarly, there's different facial recognition, uh, password alternatives. Some of them don't require you to be awake. Some of them, I believe, the better ones require attention from the user, that your eyes are open and you are seemingly awake.
yeah. But if you are like kidnapped by someone, and then they just put your face there to log you
Yeah,
in, so this one is not something that you can control, right?
right?
But
Or the
if you
police.
have a password or something else, at least you can pretend to be dementia, right?
Right. Yes. So the next topic for today is CoinDesk says they have sources that Citadel Securities is building a quote cryptocurrency trading ecosystem in partnership with Virtu, Sequoia, Paradigm, and others. And the effort also includes Citadel Securities' recent venture capital backers, like Sequoia and Paradigm, with more trading firms to come, according to a source familiar with the plans. Reuters says trading firms Citadel and Virtu building crypto trading ecosystem. Bloomberg says also with Fidelity and Charles Schwab. So there seems to be Bloomberg and Reuters seems to be backing it. The claims in this article, which Cheryl, if you can pin it to the top here, it says in the article, U.S. electronic trading giant Citadel Securities is building a cryptocurrency trading ecosystem with the help of high-frequency trading and making firm Virtu Financial, as well as VC firm Sequoia and Paradigm, according to a source familiar with the plans. Quote, this marketplace is intended to create more efficient access to deep pools of liquidity for digital assets, so a group of industry leaders are working closely together to facilitate the safe, clean, compliant, and secure trading of digital assets. Yeah, that's interesting. They've got some clout. And if you get Charles Schwab, and who was the other one that was named in there? Where'd it go? Who was it? Who was it? Where is it? Right there, Bloomberg. Fidelity and Schwab. If you get Fidelity in there, you start getting the big banks involved and stuff like this. It becomes very hard when Wall Street, which is when the big banks down there, when the big banks start getting into crypto, it's going to be very hard for the American politicians to rip the candy out of their hand, because the banks are, as Americans know, rather influential in how the politicians go about making their sausage on Capitol Hill.
Well, they will
Interesting.
look to where money can be made, right? So it's a centralized. Well, don't talk anything about decentralized anymore when it comes to crypto. Just bullshit.
So then,
Exactly what I wanted to point out.
uh,
The creators of. I'm terribly sorry, Ty.
no, go ahead. I want to ping Nicholas and get his. I think I know what he's going to say, but it'd be great to hear him say it.
He may
And
be
just
busy in Texas this week.
Nicholas.
Yeah, his consensus. I
Oh
think
yeah,
so.
down in Austin for the
Yeah.
conference. Right. So the the thing is, it'll be very interesting to see, and this fits well with his prediction that there will be um, Wall Street is going to become enamored by it, and the state will become enamored by it, but it won't be the version that you really want, which is the truly decentralized version. So the next one is from TechCrunch. It said shared micromobility company Bird, the little cute little scooters, confirms plans to lay off 23% of its staff, or about 138 out of 600 workers, spanning across the organization and regions. So, another day, another very high-profile tech company laying off 25% of its team. As I've already said yesterday or the day before, whatever, and I guess I need to keep saying it because these journalists just feel like this is newsworthy somehow. I'm assuming that the journalists who write that article, in this case it's Rebecca Bellin, who I've never heard of, so I'm willing to bet Rebecca's wasn't around for the last tech bubble. And again, just to repeat myself, and I need to write a blog post. And sure enough, the daughter article to this article even confirms what I'm about to say. The next one is also a TechCrunch sister company, Crunchbase, and it says analysis: over 17,000 workers in the U.S. tech sector have been laid off in mass job cuts so far in 2022 as Clubhouse and Fast, Glossier, Noom, and others cut back. Yeah, they're all cutting back because they want to. Because this is their opportunity to do so. Their investors are telling them to. The CEOs secretly don't really mind doing it. I mean, it's not ideal. It would be great if the economy was still going fantastically and everything was going up and to the right and it's, fiesta, Mardi Gras all day, every day. That would be lovely, but it's not. And the economy is going down. It's not that this company fucked up and made some big mistake and now they've got to fix it by cutting off 25% of their team. No, the economy is taking one on the chin at the moment. And the tech companies are a very big part of the economy. And their investors are telling them, hey, now's the time to cut the weakest people on your team all at once. And they're all doing it. All of them. Tesla included. Previously, one of the biggest companies on the planet. This is not a mystery. Maybe it is. Having been part of a startup that was backed by Sequoia sends out a PDF giving you instructions on exactly to do exactly this. We can find the deck right now. The deck came out 2 weeks ago. Some journalists got their hands on it and leaked it. There was one particular slide on it from Sequoia showing you, here's how you survive this economic downturn. You lay off 25% of your people right now, instantly, immediately. And then it shows the two charts of what happens when you do that versus when you don't. Because when you don't, you keep paying their salaries and you're burning money and your revenue is not what it used to be, but your salaries are the same as they used to be. And now you're burning up your bank account, your cash reserves. And if you lay off 25% of your people right now, you don't have that problem. You adjust for that. Now it allows you to sit through this economic downturn. There's a well understood playbook for how to behave and execute at this moment, and it's laying off 20 to 25% of your team members. Again, the investors are sending out decks to the CEOs instructing them to do this. Stop writing headlines about company A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There's not enough letters in the alphabet to cover all the companies that are going to do this. They're all going to do this, which is why the next one says analysis: over 17,000 workers in the U.S. tech sector have been laid off. Damn right. It's going to be hundreds of thousands by the end of this. Stop writing these pointless articles. All the tech companies are going to do this because they're being told to, because they kind of want to. And again, it's not due to any fault of their own. It's not like what the journalists are trying to do is imply by not indicating why they're making the cuts in the way that I just did. It implicates that this company is somehow bad or shady or fucked up. No, we're going through an economic downturn. This is what big tech companies do to survive during these downturns that the non-tech companies don't do, which end up kind of hurting them in the long run. And the tech companies are smart enough, for lack of a better word, proactive enough might be a better word, to do this, to execute this, because they're it's survival of the fittest, and they don't want to go into what's called the death spiral. Literally on the slide, that's Sequoia's internal terminology to their founders, which is don't want to fall into the death spiral of having too much salary payouts each month with not enough revenue. You're in a pre-revenue situation. You need to do one of these 20-25% cuts. So rather than cover Clubhouse like they did, I don't know, when was that? Monday, 2 days ago, or Friday last week, over the weekend, whatever. And here's my point: is when they covered Clubhouse, they did somewhat imply that, oh, Clubhouse did something wrong. Clubhouse kind of failed somehow. They screwed up. Blah 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 blah. No. Do you think Tesla screwed up? Do you think all the hundreds of tech companies that are all doing this simultaneously, that Klarna just did this last week, are you implying that all tech companies all screwed up simultaneously somehow? That they're all somehow inherently bad or evil, and now they're all doing this simultaneously? Come on. Connect the dots, tech journalist. That's your job. There's a very specific reason they're all doing this at the exact same time in the same week. You even showed the slide that they're being sent by their investors. That slide was shared from the Sequoia deck. Anyway, yeah, and they go ahead, name all the companies, count the thousands of workers, whatever, but at least understand what's going on and stop implying that it's because this tech company was shady and they were bad, and now they're cutting jobs and you're tap dancing on their grave, and come on, no, this is just really stupid behavior from. I
I
mean,
think that journalists have to appear busy in case he'll be the next one to get laid off.
anywho, they're just happy because the journalism industry has been slowly sinking for decades, and the tech companies have been booming to the moon for decades, and now whenever they're just it appears momentarily that the shoe's on the other foot, or that the tides have turned, or the tables have turned, and they're kind of dancing, celebrating, what appears to be a difficult time for the tech companies, whatever.
I
Whatever.
feel like we've been down this road before where journalists sort of spelled doom and gloom for tech. If you recall the tech bubble, it always swung back upwards and in a voracious way. I think this is agreed. I agree. This is more jealousy than anything else.
This is Vinay. I also think it's a very US or North American centric thing, because in India, we have the same thing. All those startups and all those 100+ unicorns that were made, a lot of them are doing layoffs, but the press is really starting it, calling it the winter of funding is here. The VCs are turning off the spigots on cash. They're trying to get companies. So the perspective being written here is very, very different from what you're saying, Tyler.
The press is brings about what it writes about. It isn't that it isn't that it's reporting on what's happening. It reports on what will create the most interest in the audience. And that is typically a prediction of some sort. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling. I mean, I only know this because A, I'm old, and B, I taught journalism. So, and C, I'm in tech. So there's a lot of ways I know it. And I know that once TechCrunch writes about it, it happens. Whether and I'm just using TechCrunch as a generic name of media, but once TechCrunch writes about it, it usually happens, whether it was going to happen or not. And now everyone is saying a recession is going to happen, and all the VCs usually get on the bandwagon, and it goes in a herd, and it's a cycle, and if you've been around for more than one cycle, you know that it is a cycle and it will recover. You just have to be there. If you want to be there, you just have to be there when it recovers. And actually, a lot of stuff gets started during these downturns. Some of the biggest, best companies get started during these downturns. Amazon, eBay, the PayPal.
Dr.
So,
Francine,
mhm.
is that your cool avatar in the metaverse?
That is my Women in Crypto
Ooh.
avatar NFT. I support all women's NFT projects I don't support them all, but I support as many as I can. And this is one of them. And I picked the avatar because it says a lot about me, even though it has nothing to do with me. But this is what a woman in crypto could look like.
Mhm.
Okay.
By
Yeah,
the way,
just
Annie,
just just to clarify a point. I mean, I don't remember when PayPal started, but I was really involved with in the markets when the last internet downturn. Amazon actually started during the internet bubble, and it survived the downturn. And the same thing with eBay. And it goes to Dr. Francine what we were just discussing privately before about runway. Amazon came dangerously close to being a zero. Okay, and they happened to just get off like $1 billion plus convertible offering right before, like within 30 days before everything went to hell in the internet bubble burst. Had they not gotten that convertible off, they would have been in bankruptcy. In fact, one of their ex-employees actually just posted something on Twitter, I don't know, in the last 60 days where he went through that whole history again, which I knew because I lived through it because I was working for the largest institutional convertible manager at the time. So, yeah, so I mean, that matters. I mean, there are companies that may have started in 95, 97. They got through 2000, 2001, 2002 because they had enough liquidity, okay, and they were smart enough to recognize what was going on and start cutting spending. So anyway, I'll just leave that there. Thanks.
If anybody's interested, there's a good podcast that Bloomberg has out. It's called, I think it's called the Amazon Way, or it might be Bezos Way, or whatever. Anyways, it's a 5-part series, and exactly what Ken just talked about describes how they barely made it out of right before the bubble burst, and they leaned on their basically they leaned on their vendors and said, "Look, we're in this together. If you don't help us survive, we owe you so much money. You're going down too." And the book companies basically kept them in business until it passed. But anyways, I recommend it highly. I've listened to it twice, and have my son listening to it now.
is it a podcast or a documentary?
Yeah, it's a podcast.
Okay, can you
It's
send it on the
it's a
chat?
short series. I think there's only like 5 or 6 episodes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Could you post it in the back channel?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's go to the next one here, which is in an internal email, Microsoft splits its HoloLens group and parts ways with the group's head named Alex Kipman, who a recent insider story cited for toxic behavior. Microsoft is splitting its HoloLens mixed reality group and parting ways with Alex Kipman, the leader of the group. And that's more along the lines of, you know, uh, companies stumbling, and that's a more legit. These layoff stories imply that, but obviously that doesn't hold true when they're all doing it simultaneously. But this is more the case of the kinds of headlines of a company that's bumping, its head in the night is when they lose key people of key initiatives like the HoloLens, because AR is a huge, you know, future platform, AR, VR, and Microsoft wants to have a horse in that race. And Microsoft notably really fucked up having a proper horse in the race of smartphones, and that kind of was a costly omission. A costly. No doubt they wanted to be a big player in the smartphones, but they weren't. It was kind of a bit of a 2-horse race between Google and Apple. You can imagine how much Microsoft would wish they could go back in time and have their ducks in a row to really play in that race effectively. And no doubt they really want to ideally be a player in the race of the future of the metaverse, of AR and VR and MR and XR, whatever you want to call it. So to be bumping your head at this point in time, and headlines like this don't help paint the picture that Microsoft's going to have a trusty stallion to enter in this particular race for the metaverse. This is not the time to be screwing things up. This is the time when you really want to be lining your ducks up in a row very, very nicely, as no doubt Apple almost always does, although very secretly in the background, where Facebook is working hard on it. Microsoft was by no means a laggard in this space. They had HoloLens going back a ways. So will Microsoft be a player in the metaverse or not? This headline, and this is the type of headline that indicates that things are not as they should be. Not all is well in Denmark as it should be. So let's hope for Microsoft's sake that they get their metaverse ducks in a row. The next is that in a joint cybersecurity advisory, the NSA and the CISA and the FBI have something to reveal. That China-backed hackers exploited publicly known vulnerabilities to snoop on network traffic. Several U.S. federal agencies today revealed that Chinese-backed threat actors have targeted and compromised major telecommunications companies. As the NSA, CISA, and FBI said in a joint cybersecurity advisory published on Tuesday, Chinese hacking groups have exploited publicly known vulnerabilities to breach anything from unpatched small home offices, routers to medium and even large enterprise networks. Once compromised, the threat actors used the devices as part of their own attack infrastructure as command and control servers and proxy systems they could use to breach more networks. Quote, upon gaining an initial foothold into the telecommunications organization or network service provider, PRC state-sponsored cyber actors have identified critical users and infrastructure, including systems critical to maintaining the security of authentication, authorization, and accounting. The attackers then stole credentials to access underlying databases, and they used SQL commands to dump user and admin credentials from critical remote authentication dial-in user services. Quote, armed with the valid accounts and credentials from the compromised servers and the router configurations, the cyber actors returned to the network and used their access and knowledge to successfully authenticate and execute router commands to surreptitiously route, capture, and exfiltrate traffic out of the network to actor-controlled infrastructure. And here's the last quote. The PRC has been exploiting specific techniques and common vulnerabilities since 2020 to use to their advantage in cyber campaigns, the NSA added. By exploiting the vulnerabilities, the Chinese-sponsored threat actors have established broad infrastructure networks that help them further compromise an even wider range of public and private sector targets. Okay. So the next one is the FBI and the IRS, that's the Internal Revenue Service, the tax agency, led an internal operation taking down online marketplace called SSNDOB, short for Social Security Number, Date of Birth, which sold the names, Social Security numbers, and dates of births of about 24 million U.S. people. An online marketplace that sold the names, Social Security numbers, and dates of birth of 24 million people has been taken down in a joint collaboration between the FBI and the IRS. The next one's from Bloomberg. Microsoft plans to, quote, significantly scale down our operations in Russia, impacting more than 400 staff, while continuing to, quote, fulfill our existing contractual obligations. Next is very similar. IBM plans to wind down its business in Russia and lay off its workforce in the country after suspending operations in March of 2022. Who here thinks it's a coincidence that both Microsoft and IBM simultaneously, in the same 8-hour window, both announced that they're winding down their business in Russia, laying off their workforce in the country. Literally identical headlines of the two of the very, very biggest tech companies in America. Is it possible that America, the state, the government, is actually the unseen hand drive with its hand on the wheel in relation to those two headlines? Is it possible that America is telling Microsoft and IBM, you're now going to lay off those people in Russia? And hence, two separate publications, two separate headlines, both read nearly identically. Let me read them again, and you tell me just how close these sound. Microsoft plans to significantly scale down our operations in Russia, impacting more than 400 staff, while continuing to fulfill our existing contractual obligations. By the way, that second part of that sentence, while continuing to fulfill our existing contractual obligations, that is code for Microsoft really didn't want to do this. That they were somehow being forced to do this by somebody. The second one is IBM plans to wind down its business in Russia and lay off its workforce in the country. They don't get
Okay,
much.
so the truth is,
Yeah,
Tyler, I'm going to voice in on this because I know a little bit more about it. So, what the states are doing, what each individual state is, so for instance, let's say hypothetically, California, California is saying if you, let's just say Accenture, if you Accenture want to continue doing business with us, you're going to sign these terms and conditions saying that you will not be doing business with any entity in Russia. So the
interesting.
companies are having to go back and say, hey, we want to continue our, I mean, Accenture has billions of dollars worth of business in
Right,
California for
right,
the state. And
right,
they're saying, you know what, we're going to sign up for it because we have to, because we want to keep that business.
right. Super interesting that it's on coming out the same day, same time.
I have
So
a question.
yes,
Could the state of California actually afford to just cut off a company as big as Accenture, like cold turkey, without creating problems for itself? I mean, even then, it would seem to me that they would have to phase them out because I mean they've got important contracts. You just can't. It's it's a big problem just shutting it down cold turkey.
Well, so Ken, to answer that question, what they can do is move over to the other big guy, which is Deloitte, right? So, I mean, the state plays Deloitte and Accenture against each other all the time. And so, therefore, they can say, hey, if you don't want to do it, if you're not going to sign up for this, then we're going to move all of our business over to the other big guy, or even some of the smaller guys like CGI or Encore or what have you.
So
I
does
No,
can't
it
but
imagine the
it
smaller
depends what
groups
they're
having the
consulting on,
bandwidth.
though. If you're doing it, if you're broad, let's say you're Price Waterhouse, which I know does a lot of it. If they're doing like an ERP project, to pull one of those firms off an ERP project in the middle is very problematic as compared to some other forms of consulting or whatever. You know, it just depends on what the project is, but it could be very disruptive.
Yeah, I was just going to say
Yeah,
that the
they're not pulling
bandwidth.
them off in the middle, guys. They're not pulling them off in the middle. They're just saying if you want any future business for, let's hypothetically say CDPH, which is the California Department of Public Health, then you're going to sign up for this. And that means a huge deal to all of these big companies, even the small companies, any of the consulting companies.
does this mean that all the new computers will have no Microsoft OS to run, and the old versions will all not get an update?
I can't imagine that. It is their product,
Yeah,
so they would still service it, no?
I don't know. This will affect the civilians, right? A lot.
And
What
also,
was
I
your
don't know how
question?
impactful it is to worry about a contract in the future when sentiments might change. I think you take the gamble. I mean, you already have the contracts in hand and payment guaranteed. So pulling out here seems more performative if the sentiment might change, and you may very well cinch the contract in the future, anyways.
okay. Next up, Financial Times says they have sources that TikTok Shop in the UK is in turmoil after losing at least half of its staff, which was 20 people, since its launch in October, many citing a toxic workplace. Chinese-owned social media group launches investigation into toxic working practices at London office. If you could pin that one, Cheryl, it says a culture clash between TikTok's Chinese owners and some of its London employees has triggered a staff exodus and complaints about an aggressive corporate ethos that runs counter to typical working practices in the UK. The friction has centered on the social media company's e-commerce initiative called TikTok Shop, which launched in the UK in October. Joshua Ma, a senior executive at China's ByteDance, owner of TikTok, and the head of e-commerce at TikTok Europe, outraged London-based staff at a dinner this year when he said that as a capitalist, he didn't believe companies should offer maternity leave. Well, that'll win you points at the company dinner. The episode is emblematic of a broader clash within the e-commerce division. At least 20 members of the London e-commerce team, around half of its original staff, has left since TikTok Shop's launch, while others say they are on the brink of quitting. 2 employees have been paid settlements over working conditions. Quote, there are people leaving every week. It is like a game. Every Monday we ask who has been fired, who has quit. Well, you could make a great reality show out of this. The visit by Ma was to check in on the launch of the TikTok Shop in its first market outside of Asia. The feature is an effort to bring QVC-style shopping to British users. Brands and influencers broadcast live on the social media app, selling products through a clickable orange basket on the screen. Wow. Why didn't anyone tell me about this? This sounds really, really interesting. It almost sounds like social plus commerce, like social commerce, maybe something like that. On Wednesday, TikTok sent an email to staff saying that Ma had stepped back from his role while it conducted a formal investigation into the comment and other claims brought to the company by the Financial Times. The FT spoke to 10 former and current members of the London e-commerce department talking on condition of anonymity. The company said it had a clear maternity leave policy in the UK, including 30 weeks of paid leave. Now I see what happened. So, because the UK has 30 weeks of paid maternity leave, and some of these team members, no doubt, were either had or were planning to go on maternity leave, the boss of this project, being from China, was not so friendly to this policy. He's, wants to make the bosses back in Beijing happy, and when team members are going on 30 weeks leave, that puts him in a tough situation, and he doesn't like that. So he says, as a capitalist, he doesn't like this whole paid maternity nonsense. That's really making his job very difficult. And I wonder how much paid maternity leave do tech workers or any workers get in Beijing, by the way? That might be
That's a great question.
It would be, I would love to know the answer to that.
Like Pearl S. Buck, they drop the baby in the fields and go back to work.
I
I know none of you probably remember The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck, but it's a good history of China.
So the company said it had it complies with the UK's 30 weeks of paid leave. ByteDance raised $5 billion in December. It is seeking to justify the valuation. E-commerce team members in London said they were expected to frequently work more than 12 hours per day, starting early to accommodate calls with China and ending late as live streams were more successful in the evening, with feedback reports to be filed immediately after. That's a problem. 12-hour days, that's going to be a problem. We don't really work 12-hour days in the West. They do in China.
We hardly work 8.
Yeah. So, that's a bit of a culture clash.
There are plenty of people who work 12 hours days in the United States, by the way.
Yes.
Plenty. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Images of employees working into the early hours of the morning were celebrated in internal communications as examples of commitment, while a handover in which an employee said they would work during their holiday was shared as an example of a good practice. TikTok said employees sometimes have to work flexible hours that match customer use patterns and that it aims to make this the exception rather than the norm. Several employees went off sick with stress, while some staff were removed from client accounts or demoted after taking leave. Quote, the culture is really toxic. Relationships there are built on fear, not cooperation, a former London-based team member said. Quote, they don't care about burnout because it is such a big company. They can just replace you. They coast on the TikTok brand.
By the way, does anybody see the irony in the Chinese lecturing the British on capitalism? They're basically, the Chinese are lecturing the West about its, what they view as its socialistic policies. When for all these years, the West has been screaming about communism in China. I just find it funny.
Yeah, there is a there, yeah. TikTok said it was, quote, constantly learning, iterating, and improving its service and is guided by its community influencers and merchants. The TikTok shop model doesn't work in the UK, said a former employee. It will only work if the company is willing to listen about how to do it in a culturally acceptable way that works for British brands and consumers. Interesting point. Okay, next up. Massachusetts-based Shield Healthcare Group says hackers access databases containing personal data like social security numbers and medical info of 2 million patients in March 2022. And stock advisor Delphia, which offers an algorithm-based service via its app, raises $60 million. And Saudi Arabia's PIF-backed Savvy Gaming Group acquires an 8% stake in Sweden's Embracer for $1 billion, following similar deals with Modern Times and Nintendo. So what's going on there? Let's read this. Saudi Arabia's wealth fund has made its second $1 billion investment into the Swedish gaming industry this year. And this is this big gaming roll-up that's going on in Sweden. And they took an 8% stake for $1 billion. You can do the math. You're talking around 15 billion for this Swedish gaming conglomerate that's, rolling up, as they say in business school, the market. And that's a lot of what's going on. And it was, believe it or not, started by a dear friend of mine, Rickard Steiber, when he took over at one of Sweden's biggest media companies, the Modern Times Group, TMG, who needed to diversify. This is a very worthwhile story. Bear with me. So Rickard, who I'm endlessly affectionate of, we're dear friends, was brought into one of the major media groups in Scandinavia called the Modern Times Group, who, as like all big media groups, needs to figure out their future because they don't want to become a crusty, dusty old media company, as many are, as we know is happening all over the world. They have to innovate and stay on top of things. So Rickard, being a super geek, said, let's go big into games of all kinds. So they did. And that has led this other major company, investment company to invest in a lot of the games. And, the whole gaming sector. Sweden is, as a country, probably easily per capita. Stockholm is easily it may be the world's biggest gaming capital, second maybe only to Los Angeles in terms of density of gaming activity. And yeah, Modern Times Group played a significant role in that, as does Embracer. And this is interesting moves being played there, and interesting to see Saudi Arabia's wealth fund playing a hand in that game. So, yep, it's big business going on over there. The next, and by the way, that is the future of the metaverse. When everyone's talking about the metaverse and Facebook and this and HoloLens that, okay, that's fine. But the people that are actually going to manifest that, not from the hardware side, but from the software side, a lot of that's the gaming companies And a lot of that's in Stockholm, by the way. So you could see, if you connect those dots going forward, Stockholm could become a capital of the metaverse. So the next is that a London and New York based company called Multiverse, which finds diverse candidates to fill apprenticeships, raises a $220 million round. Okay. The next from Forbes. After leaving Amazon on July 1st, so in a month, Dave Clark will join supply chain software startup Flexport as the co-CEO starting September 1st. So he'll have 2 months off, becoming the sole CEO 6 months later. So there's a transition of power going on there at Flexport, which is Ryan Peterson's company, which is just kicking ass. And he's basically trying to bring a tech startup sensibility to the crazy, crazy world of shipping containers, basically, and the logistics of moving things around the planet. And he's trying to really bring a very organized, tech-friendly approach to that whole game, and doing a wonderful job of it. But now Dave Clark from Amazon is going to step in there. Very cool. So the next is from the New York Times. Paige Thompson, an ex-Amazon employee accused of stealing more than 100 million Capital One customers' details, is standing trial. Her lawyers say she was a novice white hat hacker. Oh, okay, so it's back to our old favorite, shady or stupid, and her lawyers are claiming stupidity, essentially. A woman is accused of downloading data on more than 100 million Capital One customers. The lawyers say that she was a novice white hat hacker. They're trying to argue it wasn't shadiness. She's not doing this out of malevolence. It's out of negligence, aka that's legalese for stupid. We say, if you want, the kids on the street at the playground say shady or stupid. The lawyers say malevolence or negligence, if you want to go into legalese. But
Well, that's because the Justice Department just came out with a policy now that said they're not going to. Well, I guess if she's going on trial, that she's not out. Okay, but they have a new policy that if you can prove or they believe that you were a white hat hacker and that you had societal benevolent intentions on your hacking and you weren't doing it to enrich yourself, then maybe they won't prosecute you. So that's the new thing. But when I think, I'm not sure if it applies in this case if she's actually being tried.
the next is an analysis of political TikTok content in Kenya ahead of the August 9th general election reveals something interesting. So what does it reveal? What does an analysis of the political TikTok content in Kenya show ahead of the election? What does it show? It shows that hate speech and other problematic content is spreading widely. So TikTok is allowing hate speech and other problematic content to spread widely in Kenya leading up to the election. Why would that happen? It says Kenya's 2022 general election is slated for August 9th, and in the run-up to the voting, social media platforms in the country are teeming with political disinformation. While more mature platforms like Facebook and Twitter receive the most scrutiny in this regard, TikTok has largely gone unscrutinized. I'm loving this journalist already. Despite hosting some of the most dramatic disinformation campaigns, I'm really loving
Wait,
this
that
journalist.
person was in your room last year. No way.
Is it?
It's gotta be a journalist that was listening to
Oh,
you rant about how unequal
yeah.
things have been.
Right. Well, this journalist is from Kenya, ostensibly. Odanga Mudong. Can somebody from the continent decipher the origins of the name Odanga Mudong? Is that a Kenyan name by chance? It would be good to know. So, and I assume I can't tell from the photo. Yeah. So
It sounds like Kenyan name.
It
At
does sound
least
good. Thank you, Nancy.
I have some friends who have very, very close related like that names from
Okay.
Kenya.
Okay. Thank you for that. So, while more mature platforms like Facebook and Twitter receive the most scrutiny, TikTok has largely gone under scrutinized despite hosting some of the most dramatic disinformation campaigns. Indeed, research by Mozilla reveals that the disinformation being spread on TikTok violates the platform's very own policies. This disinformation is similar in tone and quality to the Cambridge Analytica and Harris Media content that spread on Kenyan Facebook in 2017. Yes, well, good for you. Look at you, you non-mainstream. Now note that I'm going to pin this to the top of the room and note. Oh, it already is. Thank you, Cheryl. So notice the source of the information is Mozilla.org, who makes the Firefox browser. By the way, Mozilla. And notice that this is not mainstream media. So why is it that data being reported by tech organizations are able to discuss openly that TikTok is the most egregious offender with in this regard, and why isn't mainstream media able to do the same? Or,
One word, ads.
I no doubt that's an economic conflict of interest of some type, because you even had uh, during the kind of group bashing on Facebook during the Frances Haugen whistleblowing. Um, at that same time, there's all kinds of really egregious things happening on TikTok with kids. Some might argue far worse things were happening to the kids on TikTok than on Facebook, where they don't even really exist, by the way. And yet, at that time, during these really incredible uh, viral challenges that were going on in TikTok at schools and whatnot, Taylor Lorenz and friends were reporting that TikTok was doing very positive things at schools, while we were reading headlines from local news outlets on the ground at small towns around America, all reporting that teachers were being hit and abused, physically assaulted by their students as part of TikTok challenges, to the degree that the schools had to shut down. Yet mainstream media wouldn't report on any of that. And the reporting that they did do during that time was saying that TikTok was doing positive things at schools. From none less than Taylor Lorenz.
Yeah, but
What?
I feel like the support for TikTok wasn't necessarily because, the journalist community thought they were such a great application. It was more because of their position against Facebook and sort of utilizing them to leverage Facebook and demonize Facebook as this application that's causing all harm. And we failed to look at exactly how TikTok was doing exactly that, if not worse than Facebook or Instagram. And
So
then lastly, I think eyes on Facebook was an issue for journalists last year, especially the last quarter. We saw them haggling for ad revenue, and that sort of, fueled the fire for most of their talking pieces and articles. And we're seeing a deviation this year. It's not as intense.
right now, this article from Mozilla, the Mozilla Foundation, revealing a report, is being covered by Wired and TechCrunch exclusively. So Wired, which is a real tech publication, TechCrunch is a real tech publication. TechCrunch's headline says TikTok found to fuel disinformation, political tension in Kenya ahead of elections. Great. Good on you, TechCrunch, for that headline. Next, Wired. Disinformation and hate speech fled TikTok ahead of Kenya's election. Yep, exactly right. You're both regurgitating the findings of the Mozilla Foundation, and we're reading it from the source. Notice the silence from the publications who, if this was Facebook, you know goddamn well this would be the front fucking page of the Wall Street Journal if this was Facebook that was found to have. If Mozilla was reporting today that Facebook was to replace the words TikTok and Facebook, Facebook found to fuel disinformation, political tensions in Kenya ahead of elections, or Facebook disinformation and hate speech flood Facebook ahead of Kenya's elections. If that was the findings of Mozilla, you know goddamn well this would be the top story from Wall Street Journal, possibly even New York Times. But because it's TikTok and not Facebook, fucking crickets happening over there at the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal on this story. Crickets. Why is that? So, the next one is Bud Financial, which offers an open banking service that automates affordability checks, raises $80 million. LibLab, which offers tools to automate the production and maintenance of SDKs, raises $42 million. Vanta, which offers enterprise data security compliance tools, raises $100 million. Salesforce announces NFT Cloud, a service for buying and selling NFTs, available in closed preview. Interesting. NFT Cloud by Salesforce. Next is from CNBC, a coalition including Amazon, Google, and Uber. That's an interesting pairing of tech companies. Urges the Department of Homeland Security to let kids of high-skilled visa holders stay in the U.S. past the age of 21 without a green card. And now you know why you get this unholy alliance happening, because it's an issue related to their employees' kids and their ability to stay in the U.S. So, tech companies including Amazon, Google, Salesforce, and Uber are urging the Department of Homeland Security to revise its aging out policy for children of high-skilled visa holders. They point to the more than 200,000 children who have grown up in the United States while their parents held visas, including high-skilled H-1B visas. That's particularly common in the tech industry. Once those children turn 21, they must apply for a green card, a process that can drag on and even force some to leave in the interim. Right. That's an interesting, debatable point. So you have kids who are no longer kids. They're welcome here because they're the kids of visa holders, and they themselves are not visa holders. Should they be granted visas because their parents are visa holders once they become an adult, 21?
They can convert to work visa, right? Themselves instead of
If
dependent.
they get a company to hire them.
Well, that's what the tech companies want to do, right? They want to hire them, right?
No, the tech companies. Here's the issue: you have an employee. Your employee has a 20-year-old child. Your employee says, "You know what? We're going to have to move back to wherever, India,
Because my kids cannot stay.
Thailand, wherever, right? Because my kid can no longer stay here. They're going to be forced to leave. So, hey, you're my boss, Uber, Google, Amazon. Could you put some pressure on the immigration agency, which are not returning my emails or phone calls, and tell them that they should grant my children visas to stay now that they're 21, so that I don't have to go back, because they're not able to stay here. If they're not able to stay here, I'm going to have to go back." So now the companies are acting on behalf of their own team members who are acting on behalf of the interests of their own adult children.
But these kids, shouldn't they be in school studying and then they should have a student visa, right?
At 21 years old, where are they studying?
Graduated.
Yeah, you're right. There's no shortage of options for them, just like anybody else, which is you could be a student at a university, and now you've got a student visa, and then you're here for a very long time. historically is the easiest visa to get, right? The lightest friction way to stay in the U.S. long term, as many people know. I've had many friends who took advantage of the simplicity of the student visas, and they go to a community college that they barely give a shit about, and they get to stay in the U.S. for 5 years. Uh,
And
so
21
Yeah, so
years old is
Tyler, this is
adult already. They should have their own life, right? Why are they still leeching on their
right,
parents?
exactly right. These aren't 10-year-olds or even 20. They're 21 years old. So should they continue to be able to stay on their parents' visa? The argument, I can argue both sides of this very well. The argument is they grew up here. They moved here when they were 7, and now they're 21. I mean, they've never known anything else. As far as they're concerned, they're Americans. And if they don't have a criminal record, well, then what's the problem? If they were going to commit a crime, they would have done it before now.
But I think some of the argument that I've heard is that it's like if you allow this, then it will continue. Like parents are gonna use that type of tactics to continue doing the same thing, so that in 20 years you will be talking about another, thousands and 11 million right now undocumented immigrants. So there are the kids that you were talking about, but they say that I am an immigrant myself, so I went through the refugee camp and the suffering and things like that. And my rich family now from Ethiopia, they just flew in Canada and then got the green card overnight. Well, not overnight, but very like in about a year. But they just flew in with their kids and explored with a lawyer what are the opportunities and things like that. And then they got the green card. So I think from what I hear, even from immigrant families themselves, why they sometimes argue against it is that they cut, the line, and parents also use them to do the immigration and things like that. At least that's what I heard. So, yeah, done speaking.
so they're not undocumented these because there are dependents of H1s or green cards, right? When they come
Right.
to the U.S. with their parents.
Right.
So I find it hard to believe that there isn't. This hasn't happened like in a previous wave before. In the era of Intel, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, those companies had a lot of H-1Bs. I mean, I worked for Microsoft when I was 26, but I left. But if I had kids, they would be definitely in their 20s now. I'm sure this has come up before. Um, Normally, the tech companies have lawyers that push you to green card. And then obviously citizen. So it depends how many of those immigrants who moved into the H-1B or green cards became citizens. But I don't know even what happens then. What happens if you become a citizen as a tech worker in the US? Do your kids automatically become citizens, or do they get a special status? It sounds really complicated.
It is
I
really
think
complicated.
with that one, I think if you apply, I did even myself. I moved from Canada to the U.S. and I have to go to the same process new. And if you are trying to get those H-1 visas as a worker, or you apply for a citizenship, actually they apply as a family. So they if they have kids or parents with them, and they apply together, and then they get accepted together or rejected together if you are applying as a unit. And that's a bit different because you are coming in into the country with a work visa. So that's different from what Taylor was saying, that you cross the border with kids and then they become like undocumented, or you get here and have a kid.
Sydney.
That's also
And
another
we
thing.
are and we are not replacing our population with enough young people to do the work in the future. So I don't understand why, it's like these people have already been vetted in so many different ways. We should just say, this is the kind of immigrant or new citizen we really want. but of course that's an opinion.
Yeah, I
Hey,
mean,
it's
you're
Suzanne.
21
So I
years
know a
old.
little bit about this whole immigration stuff because I kind of did it as a lawyer. So yes, what Messi has said is absolutely correct. If you come in as an H-1B, your whole family comes in with your H-1B. If you're then moved to a green card, which a lot of the big companies do, they take the H-1Bs and they go, oh, they're such great people. We want to keep them here in the United States. Let's start the green card process. The green card process takes at a minimum 2 years. If they're a managerial role, there's all sorts of complications, but usually it takes about 8 years. But I was going to say mishpoka, which is Yiddish for whole family. Your whole family is under that green card, and then generally, once the green card process starts, even if you were to change companies, you can actually do that. They won't they won't. You have to notify the government, U.S. immigration, that you are changing companies, and then the company that is going to per se take over the process has to get involved and incur costs. So it's a pretty lengthy process and a pretty costly process. But I know the big companies do it all the time, and that's why we have so many non first generation from India and such right now. Suzanne, I'm done speaking.
Susanna,
I can
question for you. So
confirm
what
that.
happens? What happens when you? So once you become, you go that process, H-1B to the whole family gets H-1Bs, and you all go green card, and the whole family gets green card. And then what happens if they become the parents become citizens? Do the children also automatically become citizens? Do they apply
Yep,
as a,
it's the
or the children is told
whole
to
family.
it's all
So
okay? So it's the whole
what
way
it
through.
doesn't
Okay.
apply to, and people sometimes get confused, and what it doesn't apply to is, so a lot of times, let's say Joe comes and he has a family. Joe's parents want to come because a lot of times they're generational. They they set up a house as a generational house with three generations. So a lot of times they get very upset because Joe's parents aren't covered by his green card. However, it makes a better case for them to start the whole green card process or application for the green card process from abroad. And they get into something called there's a lottery. And I can't remember when I think it takes place in like April, but you start filing. And even if they don't, even if their kid is not, let's say Joe hasn't yet gone through the green card process, the parents will start the lottery because the United States allows a certain number of green cards for each. I think I don't know the details. I don't remember. Sorry,
It's
it's
each country.
early,
Yes, it
but they're
is.
each country. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the diversity visa you were talking about DV.
Yeah.
That yeah, the diversity visa is a little bit different process. So I have a bunch of friends who actually came to the US with that visa. So they give it to a lot of African countries as well. You could just apply if you are a high school graduate, and there is a specific criteria. And if you qualify, they actually grant the green card even before arriving into the country. And then when you enter at the border, you pay for it. And I think there is some family members that you have to say will help you acclimate and assimilate into the society. That type of
Yeah, we have to
requirement.
sponsor them.
Right. But at least the visa part of it, they get it independent of their sponsorship, and then they get the green card very directly. I think they used to have quota. Like I remember Ethiopia, it used to be like 3,000 or something that happens. I think 300 sometimes, 3,000 sometimes from year to year. But I think they stopped it starting 2020 because of this immigration process. But that's a completely different dichotomy and different process compared to the people who cross the border having no papers and then they claim asylum. And that's also completely different process from the H1 visa that Mbwana was talking about. The company sponsors you. I tried to go through that one as well when I got married to an American and immigrated to the US from Canada itself, not even from Ethiopia, but Canada. And that we try to do it from a company, but the company has to promise that they are going to give you a job, and they also have to justify that they couldn't find American for that position. And then once they do that, they process it for you. But and they you come here and you get the H1 visa. But then, like you said, sometimes if they do really, the country thinks if they can benefit from you, you can apply for the green card, and then you become immigrant, and then citizenship from there, as a whole family, like I said before. But once you are in the U.S., then as a unit you apply. But if you want to bring a family that's not with you physically in the U.S., then they have to apply for that person separately. And then my process took a year and few months from Canada, and it took us close to $1,000. Even though we did it ourselves, we didn't hire a lawyer, but they ask you to pay for this and that. And yes, they all have a very different stream and category and the requirement. So yeah, I hope that helps. I'm done speaking.
Okay. So the next one that I have is Linktree announces link apps, letting creators embed services on their Linktree page. So this is an interesting evolution for Linktree, where it became initially a very convenient place to have all of your social media links in one place on one sort of very mobile-friendly page. And now they're allowing allowing anyone to include kind of what are called cards in Twitter parlance, like a little multimedia. Instead of just links, you can now have like your SoundCloud playlist visible and playable from directly in Linktree, or several other partners that they've teamed up with. PayPal, so people can pay you via PayPal directly on your LinkedIn page. And this adds all kinds of functionality now that they've got a whole lot of eyeballs. And these are becoming essentially, one way to look at this is building a web page for yourself has always been historically a little bit tricky. And the easier you can make it for really simple people to make incredibly simple web page for themselves, which is essentially the links to their other pages. And now they've gotten so much momentum that they can become a destination, so that it doesn't just link you out to their other pre-existing social media profiles. Now it's a destination in and of itself. It's a mobile-friendly website for you, where you can they've negotiated deals and used their volume of activity to leverage the ability to keep the user on your LinkedIn profile instead of driving you to those other places like SoundCloud. So you can embed, like I said, your SoundCloud playlist on your Linktree profile. When they click it, they will not be sent to SoundCloud. They'll stay on your Linktree profile and listen to your SoundCloud playlist and donate to you via PayPal without leaving your Linktree. And this is where it becomes very interesting now. They're becoming a destination rather than an aggregator that send you to places around the web. And now it's becoming a bit of the world's easiest, friendliest, simplest way to make a little aggregation of all of your online content into one profile page.
The first use case I saw was here on Clubhouse, where someone added a link tree and allowed the audience to add things to it as they discussed different topics. So you're going to see different use cases for this. I think this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, honestly, for LinkedIn and Linktree.
They even have a section for making money where you display your products to boost sales. You can build a little store on your page. You can put your Square account or PayPal account or a tip jar, or your Spotify profile can be put in there. And they make it very simple to drag and drop the order of the placement from the top of the page to the bottom. And they have all kinds of music offerings that you can now embed. And what else is there? There was a ton of them. Whole bunch load of new partnerships that they've done to help you build out your mobile friendly, super simple. Anyone can do it. Uh, makes making a Facebook profile page seem incredibly difficult. Well, in fact, Facebook itself makes it very difficult because if the user isn't signed into Facebook, then when they get to your page, it says you must sign up for Facebook. Or same with LinkedIn. So Linktree doesn't force anyone to sign up to see the links or what is now becoming your mobile friendly profile page that is very simple to update and keep optimized and everything else. They just raised a bunch of money that seem to be onto something. So the next one is what? Internal meeting at Twitter says that Twitter internally is now aiming to grow its monthly daily active users by 13 million this quarter, the highest goal the company has ever set, and is currently on track with 8.5 million users. What else? iOS
What are we
16.
making up for all the bots? I don't
Yeah,
understand.
exactly
That's
right.
really aggressive.
Yeah, iOS 16 coming out soon will fix the issue in SMS chats where reacting with tapbacks sends separate spammy messages. Oh, that's good. Uber and Waymo form a long-term strategic partnership to bring Waymo driver-equipped autonomous trucks to Uber's freight brokerage after years of legal disputes. This is really interesting. And by the way, this was shared in my own personal Facebook feed by Lior Ron, who I mentioned yesterday. I believe that was yesterday or 2 days ago. Lior runs.
About Amazon.
Yes, this is plays very much into Amazon's ballpark, where Uber has a freight brokerage where just as you use Uber to get a car to go to the supermarket, people with lots of stuff to ship, like lots of stuff, like you have tons of merchandise you need to move across the country, you can call up Uber Freight and they will move your, 10 tons of boxes, from East Coast to West Coast. Now, the question is, shouldn't those trucks be fully autonomous? Well, Uber was working on that, so was Google under Waymo. And so the headline is saying that Uber and Waymo are forming a long-term strategic partnership to allow Waymo's autonomous trucks to be part of Uber's freight brokerage. So you can have fully autonomous trucks driving your boxes of stuff that you use through Uber, but they will be Waymo trucks enabling that in the back end. And what that implies to me is something very, very interesting that the journalist doesn't seem to pick up on, which is that Waymo, ostensibly, is not going to be getting into this business themselves. That they're not going to allow people to call up Waymo. They have the technology. So there's two different technologies. One is the ordering system, the app, and one is the vehicle. Waymo's the vehicle. Uber is the ordering app, and they're playing friendly with each other. They kind of need each other, right? What gets far more, and then my point is that I guess this means Waymo isn't going to build their own app to allow you to order these autonomous trucks. They don't want to compete with Uber in this space. Now, that is a huge space, and it's really, really interesting. I'm more interested in the pedestrian vehicles. What's going to happen there? Is Waymo going to try and compete head on with Uber? Are they going to do a similar friendly alliance where Uber needs autonomous vehicles, Waymo has autonomous vehicles, Waymo needs people who need rides, Uber has a whole lot of people who need rides. Are they going to partner up? Are you going to see potentially Google buy Uber to get all of those users who need rides all the time and orders, like all those food orders, which Google doesn't seem to be playing in at all at the moment? That could be where this goes.
That would be the smartest idea. That would be the smartest idea because Uber can then tap into Google's large number of research tools and they can scale quickly, and they would cleanly knock Amazon out of the market. Amazon is actually reducing in the freight market. This would be great.
Well, Google did buy Waze, the whole traffic thing, and Google could have done that on their own ostensibly. Google could also, you notice, has done a couple of partnerships through Google Maps. So Google Maps to me is the super center of gravity in this whole equation for pedestrian for regular users. Because if you go to Google Maps, which is normally where you go when you want to go somewhere, and they partner with the scooter companies like Bird or Voy or Bolt or whoever, because or Lime, most notably, because Google did invest in Lime, and the argument is that they probably gave Lime a little bit of preference in their own discovery algorithm to promote the Lime. So if you have an option, you can take a train, and they have the train data available. You can drive a car. You can order an Uber, and they do that. They tell you you can order an Uber right through Google Maps, and that was kind of the beginnings of that partnership. And then you can order a little scooter, and they were preferencing the Lime bikes even over the Uber bikes. Although Uber never really got into the electric scooter, but they did get into the bikes, e-bikes. So Google Maps to me is where you get a lot of the demand, just like the Google search engine is where a lot of your intent, is you pronounce your intent when you go to Google about what you intend to do. Google knows your intent, and then they route that to the most profitable place. They're going to do the same with Google Maps, but what is that going to mean for when Google has the vehicles, meaning Waymo, but Uber has the intent or demand, meaning your desire to get somewhere? So it's going to be weird to see how they balance, leverage their strengths in the negotiations of creating the future of true mobility on a citywide scale of vehicles and cars and food and everything else, e-commerce deliveries and what have you. But the freight is now official. It's going to be Uber and Waymo. Very cool. So the next one was shared by Amay, that PayPal begins letting users in the United States move cryptocurrencies from and to external wallets and exchanges after they complete a new identity verification process. Yeah, they have to comply with the KYC and AML and all that jazz to be legally compliant, but once they do, hey, why not? Why not allow people to park their stuff in PayPal or take it from PayPal to an exchange? And now PayPal's part of Web3 officially in a very big way. All the on-ramps and off-ramps are now running and flowing. There you go. Simple as that. But they had to get the identity verification process up to standards. There you go. PayPal's now compliant with the rest of the ecosystem fully. Interesting. Next, Texas Attorney General announces an investigation into Twitter for potentially misreporting its bot accounts after Elon Musk complained about the alleged issue. And that was one of the articles from yesterday, which means we are now through today's big boring headlines, and now we get to go into the tweets. Yes, Cheryl? Yep. Yes. Yep. Yes. Okay, good. So the first.
Sorry for the background noise, but something real quick. There was a lawsuit filed yesterday. It was on Bloomberg, specifically about this bot problem. Some guy with 5 shares of Twitter stock filed a lawsuit against them for misreporting that.
Yeah, I remember reading that one a few days ago. So the next, or the tweets that I have, the first tweet is not a surprise. PayPal finally lets users transfer crypto out to external wallets. PayPal will not charge transaction fees for transfers to other users of the app. And from Saudamini, that the EU is unclear on ban of cloud services in Russia amid invasion of Ukraine. It is not clear how EU ban, if applied, would affect Russia, as the US companies Amazon, Google, Microsoft are the top cloud providers in Europe. Yeah, here comes the whole sovereign cloud issue. in full effect, where Russia's gonna have to have its own internet because the West is not going to allow Russia to partake in our Western internet. They're now going to have to. It's almost like the digital version of the blockade of Cuba, where the tech companies are not going to be allowed to play with Russia in any kind of way. They're not going to have the Western internet largely. It would be way more convenient for the West to just completely ban Russia from the Western internet as it exists. Which, by the way, the West owns. ICANN and all of these protocols are completely controlled by the West. And they can, make no mistake, you're thinking, well, I thought the internet was this big open thing that anyone can play on. No, not at all. Nope. We can boot your ass out. And we're booting Russia's ass out. Long story short, you haven't really heard that headline anywhere, but that's really what's happening. And so that's going to push Russia into the arms of China. And China is licking its lips saying, come to daddy. Come to daddy, where we already have our own central bank digital currency and our own internet, the great firewall of China. We've already got our own internet with all of our own pre-approved websites where every user is already facial recognized to the hilt, and their dogs' names and where they live at all times. Always, always, always. Where all the VPNs are already all on our side of the government. They're all been bought and paid for. So it doesn't matter if our citizens are using VPNs. We already know they're useless. We let them think that they have some sort of autonomy. It's all good. We've got it all locked down over here. And hey, Russia, we hear you don't have an internet anymore. Well, that's unfortunate. How would you like to saddle up with our internet over here? We got everything you need over here. Come on over.
So,
The water's fine.
Tyler,
I'll turn on the hot tub for you, Russia.
Tyler,
Let's hop
my
on
thoughts
with it.
are China and Russia have like a very loose, friendly relationship, and it's mainly because of border issues. And typically, their relationship is always either on the precipice of becoming strong, but never really getting there. Do we believe that this might very well be the thing that cinches that relationship, but I'm looking at the balance dynamic between the two. Doesn't this position China in a better position
Hell yeah.
over Russia in terms of
Yep.
those border conflicts? And how then
All
does
day
that
long.
change the alliance in the border conflicted areas to sway by China's side? And that support, what does that spell? Although probably minutely, right? What does that spell for the West? I think that we're cheering a little too soon here. Pushing them further into a stronger alliance is a little scary for me.
It is what it is. They were
It's more
already.
like Normandy sprawl. Um, if they want to, it's basically a lot of what everyone was saying about Peter Zion. Why would the West allow Russia back in? And wasn't there something, I don't have any headlines on it, but where the CBDC is helping float some of the Russian ruble anyway already?
What happens if there is tensions between China and Russia when Russia controls the internet, which is by extension the media? Which narrative is allowed on the Chinese internet that Russia now participates in? Okay, next tweet is from Saudamini about in a world's first, a woman gets an ear transplant with a 3D printed ear. The 3D printing process was done with her own tissue. So there was some scaffolding that enabled it's like an ear shaped scaffolding for 3D print. This gets very, 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 very interesting very, very quickly.
Is this the one from the Long Island City, Queens, New York biofirm?
Mm, Pin it to the top here.
Yeah, she's actually growing cells of her own now with that 3D. This is why I sort of mentioned it the other day. It's different than any other 3D printing, and it's really doing well so far. I can't tell in the future if it'll hold like the pig's heart, but we hope.
It's called 3D Biotherapeutics. A biotech company in Queens had used 3D printing to make a body part with a patient's own body cells for the first time ever. A 20-year-old woman from Mexico had her external ear reconstructed with a living tissue implant using a special technology called 3D printing. The New York Times reports it is developed especially for people dealing with microtia, a rare congenital condition in which a person has one or both ears absent. The transplant was performed in March on a 20-year-old Mexican lady who was born with a small or malformed right ear. The biotech
By the
company
way, microtia can lead to full hearing loss. Also,
the biotech company explained that this implant was made up of 3D printed collagen hydrogel scaffold and the patient's own cartilage cells. The structure was printed in a size and form that matched the patient's opposite ear for implantation, the report mentioned. Well, that's good. They went to the extra step to make it match her other ear. Well done. What attention to
well,
detail.
hold on there, Horsey, because they're not divulging the process either. So no one person in the science community can sort of look at the process and or even replicate it. There are some concerns there.
Our initial indications focus on the cartilage in the reconstructive and orthopedic fields, including treating complex nasal defects and spinal degeneration. We look forward to leveraging our platform to solve other high-impact unmet medical needs like lum- lumpectomy, lumpectomy,
Lumpectomy.
lumpectomy reconstruction, and eventually expand to organs. Now you're talking. Polymer scaffoldings.
This is a great justification for having digital twins or litho CT scans of your body throughout periods of your life. So, like at the age of 12, at the age of 24, at the age of 50, having a blueprint to do these types of things at different segments of your life so that you can reproduce, whether it's bone or soft tissues like they're doing now with this system. It's, talk to your talk to your insurance companies and make sure you get a good scan of yourself.
I want to
I
harp.
like I think the most exciting thing about what you said, Jason, is the idea of maybe potentially harnessing your own cells for information, data information, and then using 3D printing. But I'd love to see us use stem cells in 3D printing because I think that's where cures happen. So I'm excited for us to sort of nail the 3D printing process and then use it on a cellular level. That's going to be exciting.
I
Yeah,
agree.
I want to harvest my. When you're born, you can take out some of your umbilical cord stem cells, which are apparently the most potent, and
Exactly.
deep freeze those bad boys so that you could regrow your own kidneys if you should ever need to.
Or anything on your body should you ever need to, right?
Yeah,
These are
yeah,
new cells that'll adapt.
yeah.
If you
Literally,
even had HIV/AIDS, for example, we could potentially give you chemo and add those stem cells. There you go. You're free of the disease. It could be astronomical, scalable. I'm not sure.
You can transfer your ass skin onto your face. It's very smooth.
that sounds.
I can't stand her.
Wait until
Right?
Korea
Not
finds out
bad,
about that.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah. The skin can become smoother again
It can be.
without
We're
freckles.
gonna have to package this.
somebody patent that one.
Yes, quickly.
Okay, next up, Taco Bell unveils a whole new restaurant format, and you have to see the photo of it to understand it. So let me share the link at the top of the room. Hopefully, you'll see the photo. I've seen this before. is a drive-through incredibly similar to the drive-through banks that we used to have in America during the 70s and 80s and 90s, where, oh, did that tweet not come through? Hold on. Where you can have like 6 cars pull through at the same time, and there's simply a pneumatic tube, and then the kitchen is above the cars, and they prepare the food, and then you pull up, you enter your order number that you already ordered from the app 10, 20 minutes ago when you were pulling off the freeway, or told Siri to order for you, or Alexa on your phone or whatever, and then you pull up to the Taco Bell, you pull into the drive-through, and enter your code, and bada boom, bada bing, there's your chalupas.
This would be amazing on the way into San Francisco as you sit at the toll gates to have an entire restaurant selection above the toll gates. I think that'd be fantastic.
Oh my gosh. Bring on the extra weights. I'd gain weight every single day.
It is a pneumatic tube-like thing. Yeah, it's really cool looking format. This is going to work in America.
We talked about this about a year ago. I guess this is just
Yeah,
they
because it
opened it.
opened, yeah. So in the article, it also said it's first the project was brought up in 2021. So it's just a grand opening.
So the next is from Saudamini that Nike is discontinuing its app in China, opting for a localized solution. Nike did not give a reason for the decision. I think I have an idea why Nike's backing out of China on the same day as IBM and Microsoft. But the company spokesperson told Reuters that it planned to provide Chinese runners with some other kind of localized solution, but they, as Nike, are backing out on the same day as IBM and Microsoft. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. And so you got,
Did you say coincidence or a game of follow the leader? I thought you said a game of follow the
yeah, well, no,
leader.
in this case, they're leaving China, not Russia. IBM and Microsoft left Russia. Nike's leaving China. So stay
It,
tuned, folks. The great
it
decoupling
follows the
is afoot.
Kindle. We read the news yesterday. Kindle left Amazon's Kindle left China's market as well.
Oh wow.
India is all set to replace weather balloons with drones. The sensors embedded in the drones, which is an instrument carried by a weather balloon. Also, they're replacing weather balloons with drones. Okay, that's great. Waymo and Uber Freight agree to collaborate. We covered that one. And Beijing should seize Apple's iPhone chipmaker in Taiwan. Oh, this is hot shit right here. Look at this headline from Saudamini. It's from Business Insider. Those knuckleheads. And it says Beijing should seize Apple's iPhone chip maker in Taiwan if U.S. sanctions China, top Chinese economist says. And they're referring to TSMC, apparently, from this article. That a top Chinese economist has said that if the U.S. imposes crippling sanctions on China, and who, I remember some weird tech bro popping in here and saying that after Russia and the sanctions on Russia, that the U.S. would probably do a similar thing with China. You remember that very handsome bald tech bro who
He was a
came in?
bald guy. Yeah, yeah. I
Oh
remember the
Yeah.
yeah,
bald guy talking about it.
repeatedly.
So now the top Chinese economist is saying that if the U.S. imposes crippling sanctions on China, now why would the U.S. do such a thing, and why is the top Chinese economist even suggesting this? Beijing must retaliate by seizing TSMC in Taiwan.
Was it you that said this was all going to spark off in November, or was that Alex Jones?
I'm not aware of Alex Jones saying anything. I'm not aware that Alex Jones is available to be listened to anywhere anymore. Is he?
Yeah, he's still around.
top Chinese economist said if the U.S. imposes crippling sanctions on China, Beijing must retaliate by seizing Apple's iPhone chip supplier in Taiwan, TSMC. Quote, should the U.S. and the West impose devastating sanctions on China just like how they did on Russia, we must reclaim Taiwan. Chen Wenling, chief economist at the China Center for International Economic Exchange, said during an online forum discussing U.S.-China relations on May 30th. Quote, especially when we're talking about production and supply chains, we must seize corporations that rightfully belong to China, such as TSMC. Oh boy, this guy's spitting fire.
Is this the panda guy?
Referring to Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, the chip manufacturer that Apple relies on for its iPhones. TSMC is expected to make $17 billion in revenue this year from Apple alone. Quote, TSMC is speeding up its transfer to the U.S. With 6 factories planned in America, we must not allow it to achieve its aim, she said. Hot fire, y'all. That's hot. So TSMC is what we call a de-risking because they know what's happening. And now you know why Apple's moving to India and Amazon's getting out and Nike who's getting out 5 minutes ago in the last headline and the whole fucking enchiladas getting the fuck out of China with a quickness. Because
Why I've been saying India's in position for a lot more. I'm telling you, this is going to happen even larger still.
and why is he even worried about the U.S. throwing these hot sanctions on China, these Russian-like sanctions on China? And in his own words, just like how they did to Russia, should the U.S. and the West impose devastating sanctions on China, just like how they did to Russia, we must reclaim China. Now, I remember some very handsome, hairless tech bro coming in here saying that this was all going to happen months ago. When, by the way, to quantify it, it was precisely when the Evergrande fiasco started, with the real estate crisis with Evergrande, and how that was all going to snowball, and how COVID would overtake China into serious lockdowns, and that China would be in an unprecedented vulnerable position. Yes, BB, Cheryl? Was that my argument? Oh, I mean the tech bro?
Yeah, yeah, the tech bro said that all.
Right.
But originally, the
And
actually,
wait, it's better because I said the U.S. in such a golden opportunity would take advantage to give more recognition to Taiwan, which, by the way, we just did a formal trade agreement with, which is making China furious.
uh,
Last week.
it's called initiative, not an of. It's I
Ah,
think that
I,
yeah, the terms are a trade.
how, BB, how's it possible that America can have a trade agreement or a trade initiative with Taiwan when Taiwan belongs to China without having China part of that delegation who came to the White House to formalize that trade initiative? How's that even possible? That you could do that without recognizing their independence?
Yeah, yeah, of course, and it's all like the diplomacy thing. So the real trade agreement, but not with an agreement title. So it's all like the relationship between Taiwan and America as well. So um, yeah, it's provocative to Beijing, but you still see some delegate the details maneuver from the U.S. government. So it's still try to prevent the direct conflict here.
But what's interesting about this is, well, there's many interesting things about it. One of the really interesting things about it is exactly what we've said from the beginning, that TSMC is the crown jewel of Taiwan, and that is critical to China's economy. And there's a whole bunch of tension going on there and corporate espionage going on there, which TSMC and Taiwan are constantly pointing out all of China's attempts to steal intellectual property out of TSMC, yada, yada, yada. That was even last week again, that headline came up. And that this is, the main reason why China would invade Taiwan is specifically to take control of TSMC. There's a problem, however, with that plan. That I wonder if this minister or whatever chief economist understands, which is if you did manage to invade Taiwan and you did manage to take over TSMC, how exactly do you plan to force the TSMC uh, team members to continue going about doing the busy work that they do? Because if those people don't cooperate and run the machines, and I mean, it's not an automated process by any means. There's a whole lot of humans involved in what TSMC does. How exactly will you force them to continue doing the work that they do? At gunpoint?
Sanctions.
Oh,
And
good.
and
Yeah.
and we must remind everybody that in doing that maneuver, and let's assume that I mean, this would be, let's go into the deep fantasy land where that all happens magically without a million casualties. I assure you, it will make what's happening in Ukraine and Russia look like a fucking picnic if China tries to invade Taiwan. By the way, because the U.S. has already sworn to defend it. By the way, so has the entire West. So you're provoking the entire world against you if you invade Taiwan. By the way, so it's going to be a huge scale of order of magnitude bigger than what's happening in Ukraine. By the way, but let's imagine for a second that it all ends in 5 minutes with China winning. Right? You will still have another problem to overcome, which is the. I watched it yesterday just to remind myself. 70% of China's energy comes through the Straits of Malacca. 40% of all of China's imports and exports go through the Strait of Malacca, which is off the coast of Singapore, between Singapore and Indonesia. Sumatra, which is, by the way, 40 kilometers wide. It's an incredibly narrow threading of a needle that all of those massive container ships have to deal with, which is incredibly trivial to stop, by the way. So, China's energy supply and importing and exporting could be halted in a moment's notice in retaliation of China attacking Taiwan. So even if the U.S. didn't get militaristically involved in defending Taiwan, which it swore that it would, along with, you name it, France, Germany, all of it, everybody's on board. India, Australia, UK, all of them. So, but put that aside. Let's say that they don't, and what they do is block the Straits of Malacca, which would cripple China far faster than the sanctions that are currently happening in Russia, because you have no energy coming in. Russia is very unique. Russia doesn't need to import energy. Russia already has the energy domestically, which is why they're able to keep the lights on. China's a different story. China needs to import the energy, which it will not be able to do. So the lights will not be on.
Tyler,
Yes.
what about going through Burma, Myanmar?
They already built the pipeline. But thank you for asking the question, Pat. So this is the perfect opportunity to remind people of what happened in Myanmar and why the coup happened last year. Because China already had built a backup plan for this exact scenario, which is why Pat perfectly asked the question. China knew this scenario of blocking the Straits of Malacca is an existential threat to their existence. And they know that someday it's going to happen. So they made a contingency plan, which is a pipeline from the west coast of Myanmar, straight through Myanmar, which borders with China, into Kunming, China, in southern China. So there are two twin parallel oil pipelines that go between the port on the west coast of Myanmar, Burma, to China, uninterrupted. It doesn't go through any other countries because they're bordering countries. And at the time that was built, the military was running the country, the military junta. And then you had America was very proactive in getting a democratically elected government in place in Myanmar. I'm next door in Thailand as this is happening. And they replaced the military junta with a democratically elected government. Who, wow, what do you know, Joe? What a surprise. Start shutting down the pipeline. You can imagine how much China loved that. And what do you know? Magic presto, China starts backing the military who was kicked out to come back in and do a military coup. And now they're back. And the democratically elected government has been imprisoned through this military coup. Gee, I wonder who instigated that. I wonder who funded this military to come back in power. So they do have a backup plan with those pipelines, but those I am confident that the U.S. would have their navy positioned at that port in Myanmar to prevent usage of those pipelines, if need be.
They've got another
So
route, Tyler. They've got
I
another
know
route.
they have several. China's not stupid. China's got backup plans on top of backup plans. This is what the whole One Belt One Road initiative is all about. They have land overland from China through East China through Pakistan down to the Gulf, which is why they've done this. Why Pakistan particularly is the biggest participant in the Belt Road Initiative, and they've gone huge into Pakistan so that they could get to the Middle East to the source of the oil by land without the need for boats.
Who's building tunnels in China right now? Does anybody know?
Who's building tunnels in China? What do you mean?
Yeah, like Elon wants to build these tunnels that are here in the U.S. I think we reported on
But
we found a submarine that literally came out of the earth
Right.
in the
Yeah,
deep
there was a
ocean.
headline. Yeah, there was a headline recently that a Chinese sub came out of a hole under the ocean. Yeah, where they had built this almost like a James Bond villain lair, where they built this nuclear
Yeah,
submarine. Yeah. Well, China's building their own holes. They're not going to entrust any other country to do that for sure.
I just see them doing that. It's probably more widespread spread than we even know. So they're probably that backup plan to the backup plan might be those backup plans.
Next one up is yes.
Nicholas is back on stage. You ping him for the Citadel
Oh,
update.
right. Thanks, Cheryl. Hey, Nicholas, welcome back. I imagine you're in Austin as the conference gets underway there tomorrow, if I recall correctly.
Yep, that's right. It just arrived. I'm going to be doing reportage from Austin.
All right. So there was a headline today that I pinged you to get your comments on, which was that CoinDesk says they have sources, and Reuters and Bloomberg and others are regurgitating that Citadel is building a cryptocurrency trading ecosystem in partnership with Sequoia and others.
Tyler,
Trading, yes,
Yeah,
did you
not
cover
surprising.
Tyler, did you cover that PayPal is going to start adding crypto services? Did you see my
yes,
tweet
we
about that?
did.
And
Yes, we did. Well,
there's
they're
an interesting
they're
thread.
playing friendly in terms of allowing in and out of cryptocurrencies from the PayPal app into other platforms and exchanges and
Yeah,
wallets.
there's some background to that that's very interesting from 5 years ago. If I could take a little bit of a little sidestep, is that about 5 years ago, there's the French payment provider Adyen, and
Adyen, no,
Adyen,
Adyen's from Netherlands, by the way. I mean, I'm surprised
yes,
you didn't get that right.
no, because they did have offices in France, but their offices are here in Amsterdam, correct? But my dear friend was actually quite high up. One of my clients was pretty high up in Adyen. She actually now lives in San Francisco, and you clearly could hear what's happened. Back in 2017, Adyen was about to be acquired. They were in conversations with PayPal, but PayPal put something into their deal that said they could not accept crypto because Adyen used to take crypto. And because they wanted the deal to go through, they decided they were not going. They were going to take it out, and they weren't going to go down that road anymore. And then the deal went through. But I always said to the folks that are crypto OGs that PayPal will enter into the space, and that was one of their biggest strategic moves they did 5 years ago. So this has been in the works for a number of years. This is not new. And that's why I said it was really fascinating. But the reason why I was bringing it up is because all of those conversations were happening in 17 and 18, because that woman from France was one of my buddies, and we used to kind of be very heavily in discussing crypto because it wasn't super popular back then, and we would always have these sidebar conversations, and we were always doing what you do, Tyler, strategizing about what are the possibilities, what are they doing, and then she started traveling to San Francisco, and then now that's where she lives. But they definitely moved and migrated back in 17, 18, and 19 to start building the framework for this, and now they're announcing it. But it's a bit old news for those people that are actually connected to them or know of the inputs and outputs. Same way that you know people that work in Apple and people that know inside Visa, MasterCard. It's a bit of the same thing. But audience headquarters in here, I was always under the impression from what I heard it started in French and then came to Amsterdam, but I could be wrong.
So, with regard to Citadel, I think it's absolutely clear, especially in light of the bipartisan legislation that I was initially skeptical about, but I revised my opinion, that this is a concerted effort. We know that Citadel made the investment in Robinhood. We know that Robinhood is offering crypto. We know that Sequoia invested into Citadel 1.15 billion. And so it is extremely likely that we're going to see the old guard of the hedge fund market making world, which is basically centralized in the hands of a few major market players who seek volatility. They make lots of money by providing liquidity and market making services. And I think this is really just the coming of age of the industry. And I think, as was made clear through the legislation, most tokens will be regarded as securities, except for the finest of the decentralized protocols. And this is sort of a bellwether signal. And it'll all come down to, just as it did with Charles Schwab and TD Ameritrade and all of those guys. They will make a race to the bottom, and there they'll have to really compete with the decentralized exchanges. So it's a good sign in general. It just goes more and more to the fact that it's going to be the new version of the stock market, which is going to be accessible to more and more people.
Okay, thank you for that. So the next one is from our old friend Jane Wong from Hong Kong, who I'm tweeting now. I'm retweeting. I will try and pin it if I can. And she is notorious for being the person who figures out what Twitter is working on before they announce it. And she does this repeatedly, and Twitter engineers even write hello messages to her in their code because they know she's going to find it. And so she just tweeted an hour ago, even after we started today, that Twitter, here I'm reading the tweet right now that I just retweeted to our Twitter account at TNATW. It says, from Jane, Twitter is working on custom timelines driven by custom algorithms viewable to the users, possibly opening up the timeline curation to third-party developers. Custom timelines driven by custom algorithms by third-party developers. What a brilliant idea. That Twitter wants to get out of the timeline game because they don't appreciate the endless Senate hearings and articles from journalists blaming them for shaping the world in their vision. And they found a solution, which is they're not going to have a timeline other than chronological. Whoever you follow, that's what you see in chronological order. We have no influence on that whatsoever. You do based on who you follow. We don't alter those at all whatsoever. However, we have an app store of algorithmically generated timelines, curated timelines by the New York Times, by the Wall Street Journal, by your old school teacher and everyone else you ever met can make their own timelines to go along with their podcast, or your dog's best friend's cousin can have a timeline that they've generated that you can follow. And you can switch between them like radio stations. And then you and they are in charge of what you're consuming, not us, because we're out of that game. Because, and why are they doing this now when they could have done this all at any point? And I said a year ago that they would do this. But they're doing it now because there's new laws in the EU forcing them to reveal their algorithm for how they decide what gets shown, which is a ridiculous ask because they're in no position. It's not. It's technically a ridiculous proposition to reveal the algorithms that and to try and explain it. It would make Bitcoin seem relatively trivial by comparison in its complexity. So they're getting out of the algorithm game. There's no algorithm to show you. We don't have one. But all these other third parties have them, and if you want to force them to reveal their algorithms, well, then you can talk with them. So you'll have your own choice of algorithms. There you go. That's the future of social media. Right there. And Jane just revealed it on her Twitter account 1 hour ago. Twitter's custom timelines driven by custom algorithms, viewable to users from third-party developers. There we go. So the next tweet that I have is an affordable Honda electric scooter is coming soon in India. Thank God for this. This is fantastic. This is huge, by the way, because Asia doesn't run on cars. It runs on cute little 125cc scooters. Like a billion of them. Maybe 2 or 3 billion of them. And I love the idea that these things will, I mean, they barely use any gas anyways, but to switch to electric scooters would make Asia a whole lot quieter, for one. And I think more fun. I think it's a much more enjoyable experience to go on a silent scooter rather than a petrol combustible engine scooter. So an affordable Honda electric scooter has huge implications because Honda dominates the scooter market in Asia. And you can now see the design of this thing, the performance, the variance, and the expected price point. And I'm retweeting it now.
I wonder what I wonder what the range will be, because the range is going to be a big issue in Asia. Plus, also access to the grid for charging.
Right.
If there's a grid.
It says it will go for about $1,000, which is about 50% less than the standard two-wheeled gas combustion engine scooter. Those typically go for about $1,500 today. So if it's even cheaper, that's significantly cheaper.
I meant the distance range.
Right. Yeah. Let me see if I can find it. It says a range of 130 kilometers.
Wow.
That should do you. That should do you for a day. Most people are not going more than 130 kilometers in a day on a scooter. In fact, that'd be a very rare day that you go 130 kilometers in a day. While looking at the performance factor, the scooter speed may be restrained to around 50 kilometers per hour. Yeah, I drive very fast on my scooter, and my nice fast cruising speed on open roads is about 60. So 50 is totally workable, especially in inner cities. It says, well, the second battery configuration may provide a range of 130 kilometers. These batteries will be removable from the scooter, and therein solves your range issue, because if they start building swappable banks, which I've already seen these in action in some locations, I believe there's one in Ho Chi Minh, where you pull up to what used to be a gas station, and it's a swappable bank of batteries that they have a handle on them, and you pull it out of the wall and you plug it in your bike until the battery's nearly dead, and then you pull it out of your bike and you push it into the wall and change it for a fully charged one. And they charge you, about the price to fill the gas tank, $2-3 for the privilege of swapping out the battery. So if they're hot swappable batteries, and they will be, it would be stupid to make them not. Then the range issue, you just doubled the range in a day. If you do exceed 130 kilometers in a day, then you can swap it out as you wish.
I think it's
Very good.
already done, Tyler, swapping batteries around on little vehicles.
Yeah. Well, according to this Honda, the Honda's design for their electric scooter is a hot swappable battery design. It says the batteries will be removable from the scooter, is what it says. Okay, so I just tweeted that to the Tech News Twitter account. The next one is that PayPal enables crypto transfers to external wallets and exchanges. We covered that one. Thank you, Amay. India has its first meta influencer. India's first virtual influencer is named Kyra. Kyra has almost 100,000 followers on Instagram, and she's totally virtual. And the New York Times reporting that as the Great Salt Lakes dry up, Utah faces an environmental nuclear bomb. Climate change and rapid population growth are shrinking the Great Salt Lakes, creating a bowl of toxic dust that could poison the air around Salt Lake City. Good times. Good times. And the next one is from BB, from Nikkei Japan, that Philippine outsourcing revenue hits record amid work-from-home push. Call center-led industry logs $30 billion of revenue as it makes 120,000 new hires. And those are my buddies Bryce and Jasper. Although they did sell half the company to BlackRock just before COVID. What an interesting coincidence. The next is that Citi, the bank, adds nearly 4,000 jobs in India at their tech centers. American financial services giant Citigroup has announced the opening of 2 new technology centers in India. Yeah, the rest of the world will soon be following suit. China approves 60 new games, sparking hopes that the tech crackdown is ending. And China has approved the release of dozens of new video games. What an interesting place to live where every video game must be approved by the government to be released. And the next is that the Microsoft HoloLens executive resigns, or actually it seems like he was more kicked out for being inappropriate. And tech giants tell Biden administration to protect foreign workers' children from having to leave when they turn 21. We covered that one earlier. Thank you, Saudamini. And Nothing, which is a new phone technology company, is going to launch the Nothing Phone 1 launch event. It's now been scheduled to take place on July 12th. And the angel investors and Series A investors are all my very dearest friends. And I'm kind of kicking myself I didn't participate in the angel round or the A round. But Carl, the founder, who spends most of his time living in Stockholm, who was the founder of the OnePlus phone, has now left OnePlus to start his new company, Nothing, and Nothing is getting just insane buzz for their new upcoming phone, which will be announced on July 12th. The Nothing Phone 1. And the Chinese hackers breach major telecom firms, the U.S. Agencies say. We covered that one. And that does it for the tweets. So we did it yet again. And so we'll do it again tomorrow. But before tomorrow, I am hosting another room in an hour and a half, which you can see by clicking on the title of this room. And it will take you to the tech news. Or no, if you click on my profile, I think you'll see.
I've been on top.
Oh, thank you. There it is at the top of the room. It's the final of the 6-part series from the Academy of Robotics. And I'll be hosting that, and I have a whole bunch of good speakers as usual, and we have a fun conversation that usually lasts about 2 hours. And do join us for that if you're around. So hopefully I will see you there. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Yep, and Messi
Awesome.
also have a room in half an hour's time. I've also put it on top in
All
case
right. Thank you.
you want to join. Sport with
Thank you.
choices.